The Lord be with you.
With your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory be to you, O Lord.
While Jesus was speaking, an official came forward, knelt down before him and said, "My daughter has just died, but come lay your hand on her and she will live." Jesus rose and followed him, and so did his disciples. A woman suffering hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the tassel of his cloak. She said to herself, "If only I can touch his cloak, I shall be cured." Jesus turned around and saw her and said, "Courage, daughter, your faith has saved you." And from that hour, the woman was cured. When Jesus arrived at the official's house and saw the flute players and the crowd who were making a commotion, he said, "Go away, the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they ridiculed him. When the crowd was put out, he came and took her by the hand, and the little girl arose. And news of this spread throughout all that land. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to you, Lord Jesus Christ. This morning's Gospel appears both in the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark. Same story. But actually, Matthew gives us a little more information about the man. He tells us whose name was Jairus. And he tells us that he was a synagogue official, which is a very important job. Now, he didn't preach or offer sacrifice, but he did run the entire synagogue. Who would do the readings, all of that stuff, he was responsible for. So it was a very important job. And of course, as an official, he probably would know some very important people, whether they were medics or whatever, and therefore he would have access to all the medical that was available at that time. But obviously, they all failed. And even though he was Jewish and an official of the synagogue, for him to approach Jesus demanded a tremendous amount of courage and was subject himself to the ridicule of his brothers and sisters. But it's a last resort. And when it's a last resort, we will do anything to save our lives. You remember years ago, Martin Luther King's wife, Corazon, was seriously ill from cancer. She heard about this clinic in Mexico, and so she went there, full of hope, I'm sure, but it failed. But the last resort, we will do whatever is necessary. And so that's what this man does. As a last resort, he comes to Jesus. And, of course, Jesus heals him. And then when he goes back into the house where his family house is, there's all kinds of chaos and pandemonium. Because you see, there was a 7-day mourning for a deceased person. 7 days. And it comprised of 3 things. First, the rending of the garments. And there were 39 regulations as to how these garments were to be rented. Then there was the official mourning. There were the flute players who were part of the mourning process. And this went on for 7 days. That was the system of the time. And then there were professional keeners. You know what a keener is? Those who sing hymns or whatever at the funeral service. And I remember as a kid growing up in Ireland, I was very young, but I remember on one occasion at a wake hearing keeners. It was a very horrible, mournful sound. It was awful. I can still hear it in my mind. But that was part of the ritual in Ireland, as it was in Israel. But the critical thing in this morning's gospel was one thing: faith. The woman with the hemorrhage, she had faith. And as Jesus said to her, your faith has healed you. Faith is so critical. From time to time, when they discover new medications, there's a period of testing the medication. And they will get a number of people who they're treating and non-treating people. And to one group, they will give the new medication. But they don't know, they just know that this is the medication. The other group will get a medication, it's just a lump of sugar. A lump of sugar. But it's interesting, they don't know that. So they put their faith in this medication. And very often it has the same effect as the real medication. Why? Because they had faith in the curing qualities of this medication, even though it was just a lump of sugar. That's how critical faith is. Have faith in me and faith in God.